it all boils down to it's learning lessons. And you walk away from, your a bad meeting where your creative didn't work or the client hated it or internally it didn't work, or you're even sharing it, with your chief creative officer or, the head of the account team or medical. And, they're like, just don't, nah, it's not working. And you can never take it personally. You just have to say, I'm going to go back. I'm going to work harder. I'm going to make it better. Thanks for the feedback. And you move on.
Today on The Flame, I'm joined by Carl Napolitano, a creative director with over 15 years in healthcare and pharmaceutical marketing, leading everything from brand storytelling to large-scale omni-channel campaigns. Like so many creatives right now, Carl's been navigating a tough job market since being laid off this past summer. We connected recently on LinkedIn and immediately found common ground in our experiences, frustrations, and questions about where this industry is headed. Today's conversation is an honest one about creativity, resilience, and staying grounded when the system feels broken. Let's get started. Hey, Carl, how are you?
Good, Bob. How you doing?
I'm doing well. Thank you so much for putting up with my scheduling issues.
No,
kind of
not
go
a
back
problem.
and forth a little bit.
Thank you for having me on. I appreciate it.
Yeah,
it's going to be
great.
fun.
It's great to have somebody on. Most of the people I have on don't have the pharma background. They don't come from my neck of the woods. Oddly enough, I haven't interviewed a whole lot of people in that, but it's good to have you on and that we're kind of have some of the same background there.
Yeah, definitely.
Being creative directors, being in the pharma space, which in our area, the Northeast corridor, it's kind of like, it's like the tech industry out in California,
Exactly.
like the pharma world out here, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you go out to Jersey and it's just, from Novartis all the way down, down to Philly. It's just pure pharma world.
Can't get away from it, unfortunately.
Yeah. No.
Right? So the part I love about the podcast is this just reaching out to people, whether I know them or not, and just offering to have conversations. And, Carl, for listeners, Carl popped up on my LinkedIn feed, somebody who was out of work and just kind of thought that, your story was interesting and that you were, love to find connections with the people that I'm meeting with on LinkedIn and bringing on the podcast. But the cool part is we didn't really know each other. And so, I would love to give you the opportunity to introduce yourself, give listeners a little bit of a background, your story, and kind of where you're at right now.
Yeah. I got my start in the crazy world of pharma, maybe had to be almost like 18 years ago. I started out working for a journal, a medical journal, and knew nothing about pharma advertising, didn't even know it existed at the time. That journal was moving. They were closing down shop. And they were moving out of Westchester and deep into Jersey. And my creative director at the time, I was just an art director, very junior. She had mentioned, hey, why don't you look into pharma advertising? You're always talking about you love the world of advertising. Why don't you try pharma? I was like, I didn't even know this existed. Yeah. Okay. And I ended up at Klein Davis and Mann knowing absolutely nothing about anything, but immediately got hooked and just been on basically a roller coaster, a good roller coaster ever since. That's kind of got me, I tried a few times to get out of pharma, but somehow pharma always pulls you back in.
Oh, pulls you back in, right?
So, but I love it. I've been doing it. I don't foresee myself getting out of it. I don't really want to. I enjoy doing this. I hope I keep doing it for another 18, 20 years. Maybe not that long, but
Well, as long as it'll keep paying you, right?
Exactly.
But that's funny you say that because you hear most people that are in pharma and they're like, oh, I can't stand it anymore. I can't deal with it anymore. But you enjoy it.
I mean,
right?
there are days where you're like, Jesus, what did I do? Like, why didn't I just be a plumber or go, work construction or, go work in Home Depot or something like that. And then, there are times where things are going really great and you're like, yeah, this is why I did this. And this is why you continue to do it.
Right.
It's kind of like golf. I don't know if you play golf or not, but like when you're playing golf and you're playing horribly, you're like, this is just, why am I doing this? I'm quitting. I'm going to throw my clubs out. And then you hit that one good shot and then you're hooked and you're like, I'm going pro. I'm never quitting.
Right. Gives you that motivation to keep going, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
you've gotten at Klein Davis, I'm sure you got to work on a bunch of great
Yeah.
projects, a bunch of great initiatives. And so, I think most people maybe don't understand how creative works in pharma because all you people's touch points with it is really like the
Yeah.
the spots that you keep seeing after a million times during a
Yeah.
football game. But there's more to it, and there's a lot of it's not just that, right? There's tons of there's a wide spectrum of work that you can do in the pharma world. So
Right.
and I'm sure you've kind of touched different areas of it. So like thinking back on your career so far, like what is it about, you mentioned that you love it, and what is it about that still kind of drives you, motivates you, and keeps you kind of creatively engaged?
I think it brings me back to like before I became an art director. When I was in school, I wanted to be an illustrator or a painter.
Mhm.
And what I really always enjoyed about painting or drawing is you start off with a blank piece of paper, and then days later, weeks later, something comes out of that. Whether it's horrible, it's always subjective. But I think what I love most about doing this job is starting with a blank piece of paper. And you're getting medical downloads, and it's you're meeting and you're strategizing, and you're starting on this blank piece of paper, and then something comes out of it after you kind of interpret all of this data and all this science and all these discussions and strategy meetings, and then you create something. You hope that you're creating something that's good, but also it's having the end user ask some questions. Is this
Mhm.
going to matter for my patient? Is this going to matter for the HCP? What is this going to change tomorrow? Is this going to change my behavior? And most importantly, from a client perspective, you want to create something. Is this trustworthy? Is it you want to create something that has meaning and that's going to come across as genuine. But all of that, like it's that blank piece of paper. It's working with the team, strategizing with people, working with the medical team, getting those medical downloads. I think that's what really makes it interesting because you're just getting like this giant data dump. And then coming out of that is, maybe it's an MOA, that turns out really beautifully and explains something very complex in a very simplistic way that's very understandable and very
Mhm.
digestible for the end user. That to me is what's really fun.
Right. It's amazing how much you get to learn
Oh
from a
my God,
scientific
yeah.
perspective, right? I
Oh
mean, you
yeah.
learn all the ins and outs, you see what all the hoops that you have to jump through to get something, and how strict you have to be with the language. And sometimes it's like, man, there's so many restrictions. Like, how can I be, it feels like it shouldn't be creative, but I think that's the problem solver brain in us as designers, is to be like, all right, I am very boxed in with these restrictions, and how can I find or be creative within that?
Yeah, working in pharma advertising is literally a definition of working in a box because you are so with all of the regulations, all of, dealing with MLR, you're so boxed in. But somehow, you come up with something that's really creative and really tells a story and really means something, hopefully, to a user, whether it's a patient, whether it's an HCP.
Mhm.
That's really that is amazing because we are so like boxed in.
Right. And that was the other thing that I tried to take away was, it's one thing if like, all right, great, I work for Apple, I work for Nike, somebody bought a phone, somebody bought a pair of shoes, like
Yeah,
who cares, right? But in the farmer world, like there's ripples that come
absolutely.
out of it, right? Like if you're working on a video, or an IFU video or an MOA video or any kind of like a patient centric video, like there's so many different people that will view that, and that could
Absolutely.
have an impact
Yeah.
on them. And it's not just the dancing people trying to sell you a drug on an ad. There's so much that goes into it on the back end of it. And what you create, or hopefully, if you're working on if you have the pleasure of fortunate enough to work on a project that has some real impact, I mean, it can be really rewarding to be
Yeah.
in that line of work in pharma.
Yeah. I think that's when you get the chance to work on something. For me, a big part of what I've done is booth work, in conventions, seeing like months
Mhm.
and months of planning and meetings and all of this work come together. And it's usually what's really nice about doing work like that in the convention space is you're using everything. You're using print, you're using digital, there's video, there's the interactive. And when you see all of that come together and tell a very complex message in a very visual, digestible way. It's very satisfying. It's sometimes it's mind blowing. You're a few times that I've been on the conference floor, 12 o'clock, 1 o'clock in the morning, and they're finishing up a 70 by 20 booth that you've been working on for months. You're like, wow, this is amazing. It's amazing this even happened.
Yeah. What did I just do?
Yeah. How this even work?
So, like I said, pharma, there's so many avenues in pharma that you can go into. Did you have a specialty that you worked in primarily, or did you have the opportunity to work across indications
Worked
and therapeutic
across the
areas?
board of different therapeutic areas. I worked a lot in the beginning in oncology, then moved over to things that were
Okay.
a little bit more rare disease type of stuff that you wouldn't normally even know about. That you get involved in something that's like you didn't know this rare disease existed, and maybe it's only affecting 1,000 people or
Right.
something like that. It's like, wow, that's also another interesting thing about this business is you feel like, all right, you're affecting change in some way. It may not be that huge, but you're still you feel like you're doing good.
Right. Yeah, you're part of that process, and I got to do that as well. Like I feel like working on the rare disease projects was probably the most
Yeah,
rewarding for me because you could really see how it
yeah,
impacted people, and the people are in those therapeutic areas are
absolutely,
really
yeah,
passionate about what
yeah.
they do. So it's good to see that. Now, did you get to have a large team, or
I've worked
what was your
with
team comprised of?
large teams and small teams. Most recently, it's been with like
Mhm.
medium-sized to small teams. In my past, much larger, the whole gamut, from art directors, junior art directors to digital UX, video, and
Right.
copy. Which is that's another fun thing about all is
Okay.
you get everybody in the room, and nowadays get everybody on the Zoom or Teams meeting and the whiteboarding sessions. Those are always a lot of fun, and that's usually where the big ideas come from. When you get everybody in the room, you start just
Yeah.
throwing stuff up on the wall.
Do you kind of miss those
I
days of
think
being in
so.
person with
At
people?
times, I think that you know there are things that have come out of remote work that are really fantastic. I think it's from a scheduling perspective, being able to like start my day at 7 a.m. Like start my day at 8 a.m. Like there's no like I personally I commuted for the majority of my career into Manhattan, so I was always on a train schedule. Like I have to be at a certain train station at a certain time. So like my day was always the same schedule. Working from home over the past,
Rough.
has it been 5 years now? It's like now I'm not on I'm on my own schedule. I could start my day and end my day, and I get to pick and choose. If I want to keep working until midnight, I could take a break, eat dinner, and all I'm doing is just going from upstairs to downstairs. Whereas back in 5 years ago, it was like I gotta get on a train, hour and 15 minutes,
Right.
get home from the train station. All that time's gone that you're just losing. So from that perspective, from a scheduling perspective, it's been great. I think from a team perspective, it's a little bit difficult over Zoom to get that
Right.
vibe that you get when you're all in a room together and you're working together. I don't know if we're ever going to go back to
Right.
full time. I think everything is kind of moving towards like a hybrid scenario these days.
Especially as layoffs continue to happen and they're looking for alternative sources for creative or production, or I think what hurts most is, the leadership that gets let go, and it's hard because there's so much knowledge out there that just goes away and then they're like, all right, now they're placing so much responsibility on remote designers or people that may just not have the questions to ask. I think that's been the hard part, especially on top of not being able to be in the room with somebody. I think you have to have been in the office to appreciate not having to be in the office, right? Like my commute was an easy drive through the suburbs. I didn't have to get on a highway, but it was an hour.
Yeah,
And if you spend 2 hours of your
yeah.
day,
And I think that's one of the benefits of the remote work is I've been able to spend time with my family and do things with my son that I would have missed easily back 5 years ago. I say that like 5 years ago, so long ago.
right, right. But after, you having, speaking of teams and leadership and that kind of stuff, like after being in a leadership role for that amount of time and now in the situation that you're in, like how does it suddenly kind of feel to be on the other side of the job market? Because maybe in the past you were responsible for interviewing and hiring people and bringing people on and evaluating talent, and now we're on the kind of both on the other side of that in this job market. Like um, how's that? How are you dealing with that?
It's definitely on the humbling side because you you're kind of like riding this wave of uncertainty of like where things are going uh, during this market, and it's been definitely weird, but not.
Hmm.
I feel like I went through this once before. I think it was like in 2009, where it was like just a weird time, and a lot of people were getting laid off. And I think that
Yeah.
anybody that's been in this business long enough
Right.
knows that. And it's sad to say, but getting laid off and going through these type of things, it's part of the gig. Like you're at some point in your career, it may happen once, it may happen twice, it may happen more than that. But I think most people that have been doing this for a long period of time, they know that at any moment could be you. Like that's just, and you just
Hmm.
kind of
Right.
are prepared for it a little bit more than if you were younger and this was your first job and, you suddenly got laid off. You don't
Right.
understand. Like you're not even thinking in terms of like, oh, we lost a client and that affects X, Y, and Z down the road. So it's different. You just have a different perspective when you're a little bit older.
Right. I mean, in 2009,
Yeah.
I feel like layoffs now, you hear so many people are on extended layoffs, extended periods of time. Whereas maybe in 2008, 2009, because I was laid off for right around that time as well, but it didn't feel as
No,
hopeless, I
definitely
want to
not.
say then, right? And LinkedIn wasn't, I mean, I think LinkedIn was around, but it wasn't as big of a thing, I don't think. And so there was more of like you were, on the monsters and the
Mhm.
career builders but it just felt like you were like, all right, I'm going to get a new job. I'm not going to be laid off for a long time. And now with so much more experience, 10 years ago, more than 10 years ago, maybe, you would think that it would
Piece of
be
cake.
easier to, be able to apply and use, be like, I'm an expert in this field. I have decades of knowledge. I should be an easy hire. I hear people tell that to me all the time. No, you should, you'll get hired right away. And that's not the case. And so it's almost like
Yeah.
as we become more connected virtually and have more outlets,
Yeah.
it's almost even harder. So, we talk a lot about LinkedIn. Obviously, we met through LinkedIn, and it really is like almost like has become an echo chamber, right? A lot of people saying the same things, trying to position themselves the same way. So, like in your time now, kind of being freelance, how has that platform kind of helped you or hurt you in your search, do you think?
I think it's helped in certain ways because, for example, meeting you, I don't think I would have met you if it wasn't for LinkedIn. But I think that LinkedIn is suffering from the same issues that a lot of social media platforms are suffering from, where people go to unload whatever bad feelings they have about whatever. You really have to do your digging to get to the people that are on LinkedIn that are there for the right reasons. And I think that it's not as easy as it used to be because there's just that many. Just everybody's on LinkedIn
Hmm.
now. There's no alternative to LinkedIn. There's no other, like back in the day it was Monster and Career Builder, like you were saying. But now it's LinkedIn or what? There's nothing else. If you go on and you dig around and you
Right.
connect with the right people,
Right.
you'll meet people that will have the same vision that you have. And from a recruiter standpoint, there's a lot of recruiters out there nowadays, and it seems like it's just scattershot. Like it's so many recruiters, and to find the
Right.
right ones for you is a lot harder than it used to be.
Right.
Whereas back, I'm going to say back in the day, it was 5 years ago. If you wanted to meet with a recruiter 5 years ago, and if you
Right.
worked in Manhattan, you went to their office, you met them, you sat down with them, you had a conversation with them. And then sometimes they would say to you, you got time because the office for this job is on X block and it's, 3 or 4 blocks up. Do you want to run over there real quick and maybe meet the team? That doesn't exist anymore. That's like, right? Like 5 years ago, that's what people were doing. Now it's like this step by step process that I'm sure thousands of people are falling through the cracks because of the step by step process. You talk to a recruiter and then you just end up like in this hamster wheel, waiting, waiting, waiting. And, I'm sure these recruiters are completely overwhelmed by the amount of people that they're dealing with.
Right.
So that's kind of the downside, like we were talking about, in person pre-pandemic to now. I think the human connection has been lost a little bit because of we're meeting like this. You're meeting a recruiter, you're meeting somebody that you may work for over a Zoom call.
Yes.
It's really, you got to really do your due diligence when you're meeting people online
Hmm.
because it's a total different ballgame now. And it makes it a lot harder to make that human connection.
Right. And that's so spot on because, like you said, in the past, it was Indeed or Monster or Career Builder, and it was just like a job posting board and you put it up and then you hoped you'd hear back. But when you worked with a recruiter, you felt like you had
Yeah.
a personal connection to these businesses and felt like somebody that was working for you and trying to help you. And now it's like
No.
they've become like that's gone away. There's no personal connection. There's no bedside manners, right? With recruiters. And like they don't even try to read, like you basically are doing their job for them. They don't even try to reach out and build connections.
Oh, yeah. It was like your own personal, I don't know if you ever watched the show, Entourage, but it was like your own personal Ari Gold. You had somebody that was like, I'm gonna, make the calls. That doesn't exist anymore. Or if it does, it doesn't exist in our business. Maybe it exists in a
Right.
different, maybe tech or something else. And
Right.
I wish I could remember the person's name on
Right.
LinkedIn. He posted that he should
Yeah.
start his own agents for creatives. He was like, in the creative world, there's have agents, musicians have agents. How come art directors and creative directors and copywriters don't have agents? He's like, I should start. I don't know if anything came of it, but I just thought I was like, yeah, how come? It's a great idea.
Yeah. Yeah. That does sound like a great idea. Almost sounds like a recruiter. But it's like my the job I had gotten at when I landed at the account at Service Advisor, I got that through a recruiter. I had a great experience working with a recruiter. And it was, I don't even know if they exist anymore. I think it was called the Boss Group. They were like a recruitment agency and connected with them, had a great rep that I worked with.
Yeah.
She got me the job, got me a good rate. And then I ended up going full time and working there for 12 years, right? And so I made a lot of connections. And then even like you said, just a few years ago, there has been a change in the past 5 years where I felt like I've had conversations with recruiters, felt like it was going well, but then that kind of slowly shifted to just them feeling like you're not getting on the phone with them, you're not having even a Zoom call with them. It may be maybe if you're lucky, you get a phone screen, but it's mostly just become cold. It's almost like working with, am I working with AI? Am I working with a bot or am I talking to a real person? Right.
Yeah. I think the new thing is the ghosting is the new rejection letter. Like you don't even hear back sometimes, which is really odd. I don't understand why, but that's like, okay, well, I guess
Right.
that's the rejection letter, this,
Hmm.
but I think all that being said, I think that there are, I've worked over the last 5 months with some very good recruiters that have gotten me freelance work and that have kind of had that old school mentality where they'll pick up the phone and if they'll pick up the phone even if something doesn't work out, like, hey, just wanted to let you know,
Good.
leave me like a voicemail, like, well, like that was like, I got to call this dude back immediately. Like, who leaves a voicemail anymore?
Hmm.
Yeah.
Right. Well, maybe we should start. I know that there's been a rallying cry against recruiters, but maybe we should start highlighting the good ones on LinkedIn and being like, "Hey, I had a great experience," and
Right. Yeah.
maybe get them more business. Maybe that encourages them to continue doing things the old school way or the right way, and being personal. But it takes it's a confidence hit.
Right.
Not only have you been hit, your confidence is blow taken to it by being laid off, whether that's for a good reason or not, and then having to fight that to wonder like, man, I can't even get in front of a recruiter. Like, what as a
Hmm.
creative person, like your identity centers so much around um, being your
Yeah.
self-worth as a designer, right? And people valuing creative, which I feel like is kind of going by the wayside. Talk to me a little bit about that creative confidence and the things, how you've personally managed that, like how you've been able to keep your creative confidence during this time.
I think it goes back to what we were saying earlier. Like, I think you get to a certain point in your career where when you do get laid off, for whatever the reason is, the company loses a client, there's a recession, whatever the reason may be, when you do get laid off, you don't take it as personally. You don't say, well, I guess that's it. I'm done. I'm going to go and do something else. But I think it, obviously there are days where you're just like, oh man, it does take a hit. But most of all, I think you get to a certain point and you're just like, well, like I was saying earlier, it's kind of part of the gig that you're going to have to just ride out if you want to stay in this business. Like you can't take it personally. And then I think what being in this business and being a creative and having to get up in front of a room
Right.
of people and show your work that you've been working on for months, a week, whatever it is. I can't tell you how many times it's my work has been shot down. It's been called bad. It's off base. It's whatever, you develop a tough skin after a while. And you don't think because you had one bad meeting that you're horrible and you suck at this job and you shouldn't be doing this. You think like,
Right.
okay, I'm going to go back and I'm going to work harder and I'm going to create something better,
True.
take all of their feedback. And at some point in my career, I got to the point where I was like, I went from taking offense to bad feedback to appreciating the feedback. And really I can't tell you how many times I've walked out of a meeting where I've walked right back in to the team and say, hey, that was good. I appreciate that. Thanks, because I didn't see it that way. Now, your insights kind of helped me. So when things like layoffs happen and you're out of work or, you're bouncing around from freelance gig to freelance gig happen, it doesn't really affect you from the same way it would maybe a little bit earlier in your career. At least for me. I can't speak for everybody, obviously, but I think, you have your bad days, you have your good days, but at your core that you've been doing something for a while and you're good at it. This is just a bump in the road that, will get fixed eventually.
Right. That's a great point of view because, you're right. When as a creative, people that aren't in the creative or the design industry, advertising industry may not know, like, you are always trying to prove yourself, whether you're a designer trying to get your design past your AD or the creative director trying to sell something to the client. You're constantly taking hits. You're constantly being told, hey, this is off the mark. This isn't great. Rework it. I'm not happy. Like it's rejection almost on a daily basis. So yeah, we may have a little bit of a thicker skin, but it's good to remember that we're not naive to feedback and criticism.
Oh, and I think that it all boils down to it's learning lessons. And you walk away from your a bad meeting where your creative didn't work or the client hated it or internally it didn't work or you're even sharing it, with your chief creative officer or, the head of the account team or medical. And, they're like, just don't, nah, it's not working. And you can never take it personally. You just have to say, I'm going to go back. I'm going to work harder. I'm going to make it better. But thanks for the feedback. And you move on.
Right. And we talked about how things have changed in the job market from years past, but now we're seeing big industry shifts. We're seeing, like small groups get gobbled up and then spit out, seeing like the conglomerates kind of taking over. So, and you've lived through those mergers and layoffs and restructuring as a lot of us have. And so what do you think fundamentally has changed about the industry? And maybe it's not just pharma, but just in creative. Have you had an opportunity to kind of like reflect on that?
Yeah, it's definitely been happening over time. I don't think that it happened overnight. I think that it's been like incrementally, I think the bigger agencies have just been they're just gobbling up everybody, and the holding companies, with what we just saw in, was it December when everybody got laid off the IPG merger. When you see things like that happening, on one hand, you're like, I don't know, is that good for the clients? Is that what they want? And then you think like maybe the smaller agencies, independent agencies that don't have any attachments to the large conglomerates will thrive a little bit more. I don't think it's going to happen anytime soon because I think some big client like a Novartis or a Pfizer or something like that is going to have to take a big leap on a big brand and take it to a smaller non-affiliated to such and such holding company. I think once that happens, it'll open up the floodgates for the smaller agencies to kind of thrive.
Right.
But I think that you gotta assume that part of this is,
Yeah.
from a client's perspective, is like, that doesn't look good from an optics perspective. It's been happening for so long. And I think that
Right.
I don't think it's going to change until we get to the point where it's just one holding company with just multiple, companies leading into it. That's crazy.
Yeah, right. God help us. But I kind of think with all the talent being cut loose, you're going to start seeing those like super lean, super creative
Yeah.
shops start to open up, or like teams that are working together, like a copy creative team that just kind of go out and that kind of stuff. But even from the client's perspective, though, you mentioned that it's kind of, it doesn't look good. But like, what do you think the marketers are actually looking for? Like, they're seeing all these changes happening. Like, what do marketers really want nowadays? I mean, I know you and I can speak to pharma, but like, I wonder if is that really what they want? They want to have to use or be locked into having to use these big agencies that they know there's going to be all these change. Like, what do you see changing from a market perspective on the client side that is things, their pain points that they really want in an agency?
That's a good question. At the end of the day, sadly, it's probably, how can I save the most money? Because it's all going to boil down to budget at the end of the day. And if X agency with giant holding company can do it for my
Mm-hmm.
budget, then
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to be happy and I'm going to stick with that. But I don't know what they're looking for these
Mm-hmm.
days. That's the scary part. You would think that it's not just, I would hope that it's not just about the money, that there's more to it, that they want something that's going to be effective and creative and it's going to tell a story and it's going to have impact and people are going to talk about it and it's going to be something that's going to make a change, that type of stuff. I hope that's happening. I hope that's being talked about. Whether it is or it isn't, that I don't, this,
Mm-hmm.
it's wacky out there. So I don't know.
Right. Well, when you're in those meetings with clients, I think it always ends up boiling down to money, right? It's like, I don't care how we get it done. And it's almost like, can we get our messaging across with as little
Yeah.
the regulatory team, and can we get it done on time? It's like time, value, money, and not so much.
I think that what I've had the luck of working with really good people that have wanted to work like, okay, well, here's our budget and the client is asking for X with this budget, but we can't shortchange our client and we can't shortchange ourselves. So
Mhm.
let's push beyond what the client is asking for. If nothing else, just to show them
Right.
that we're invested in them as much as they're invested in us. And it's not all just about, from our perspective, just about the dollar and the budget. You know, I've always, no matter what it is that I'm working on, I've always wanted to, it's the 3 option rule. You give the client exactly what they're asking for. And this will probably come in on budget or under budget. Here's something a little bit further away from, what you originally asked for. It's still on brief. It's probably going to come in on
Mhm.
budget. And then here's something that's
Mhm.
completely, you didn't ask for this. This is completely, we wanted to show something that's completely different that you're going to be wowed by. And that, I think, is how you build a relationship with a client, because you can then have that discussion about whether, well, can you do that
Right.
for the budget? And if you can, then, or maybe can we take elements from that and do it with the budget that we have? And I think that from an agency perspective, those conversations with the client,
Mhm.
that's how you build a relationship. And I think that that's the best way to work, because just doing what the client says all the time,
Right.
and worrying about the budget is not going to foster a good relationship. You got to have those tough conversations with a client.
Right. 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 They're not paying for you to just crank something out. They're paying for your expertise, right? Right. Right. Have you thought about trying to go outside of pharma in the time that you've been searching, and have you considered that? And like, what do you think, do creatives in pharma get boxed into it when you're trying to pivot outside? I feel like it's almost harder to get out than it is to get in. But what is your experience there?
I think it's very difficult once you've been doing pharma for a while to get out. I think if it goes differently the other way. I think if you've been in more consumer, Nike, whatever,
Uh-huh.
Verizon, whatever, name the client out there in the consumer world, and then getting into pharma, I think is easier than doing the other way around. And I don't know why. I do and I don't. I think
Mhm.
that most people view pharma as like it's a very niche, like
Right.
particular kind of thing, and you only know how to do that. You don't know how to do anything else. But I've always thought if you can work with the restrictions of the FDA
Right.
and you can,
Yeah.
you're working on a drug that helps you sleep or it helps you, whatever the crazy thing is that's wrong. If you can work on those type of things, like selling sneakers has got to be easier. Selling beer has got to be a lot easier. I'm sure there are constraints, but I mean, that is
Right.
nothing like FDA constraints.
Right. Right. No, it's a tough world, but I always would tell my creatives that like if you can design, come up with creative solutions within those restrictions, you should be able to do that anywhere, you know?
Yeah. Like, not that, obviously, working for Nike or going to Wyden Kennedy or something like that and working on Nikes can't be easy. But when you have the ability to just have like an open, you could go any direction you want and not have to
Right.
worry about the FDA being like, you can't say this word and you can't say that word and you can't do this.
So many ideas have hit the cutting room floor
Yeah.
because of that, right? But so you're freelancing right now? Is that kind of where you're at in your, so has that changed or does that excite you about how maybe rethinking how creative work gets done, given that there seems to be some turmoil with the big agency model, and now you're getting to have a little bit more freedom as a freelancer, and maybe I don't know if you've thought about starting your own business. Like, have you, are you? Does that excite you at all?
It does. I've thought about doing that a lot. And I think that's like, there are certain days where you think about it and you're like, how hard could it be? And then there are other days where you're like, that's just like, I got a better chance of, becoming center fielder for the Yankees. Like, it's just not gonna happen because we're in this weird world that we're in right now. But I think that as time goes by, I do think, like you were saying earlier, I think that creatives will get together and maybe start making smaller type of creative agencies that are going to just work with smaller clients, not the Novartises of the world or the Lillies of the world. There's probably a ton of biotech companies out there, healthcare companies out there
Mhm.
that, would love to have the budget that the big companies do, but they're never going to have that.
Sure.
So I think the people that can crack that code, make that agency that'll work with those little companies, but give them a product that looks like it came out of the big agencies. I think the people that crack that nut will be very successful.
Yeah, for every massive, large budget drug brand out there, even within the pharma
Right.
companies, most of them, they just have like their one flagship drug, right? Like for a long time and at
Yeah.
Pfizer, it was like Lipitor or Viagra, right? And then once those things go off patent, then, they're on to the next big thing. But then there's so many other smaller drugs or smaller brands that don't or can't afford the services of the larger agency.
I think people are so connected with technology these days. Everybody's expecting everything to look like it was created by Apple, So these smaller companies that may not have the budget to get a product to look like, that it came from a big agency, but they know what they want it to look like. They may not have the budget. They just need the right team to do it for them for a lower price. That's the trick.
Right. So I always like to give guests the opportunity to drop a little knowledge, a little encouragement to people who may be in the same spot as them. And so have you come across or learned anything on this kind of this journey? I mean, and it is a journey. It is a journey. Like, and maybe it's something that you feel differently about than you did 6 months ago. Like, what is some tips or some inspiration you can give to people who are in your spot?
I think the most important thing is don't take it personally. It's has no reflection of your work you know, or you as a person. I think you got to accept the fact that these things are going to happen and it's part of the industry. It sucks, and it's hugely, humbling. But I think that it was either Michael Jordan. Well, it was either Michael
Uh-huh.
Jordan or Tom Brady. It wasn't the wins that helped me, grow as an athlete. It was the losses, and I think that stands true in business too. I think it's like when things like this happen, it's going to help you grow, and it's going to help you be a better. You're going to come out on the other side as a better creative director, art director, copywriter, whatever it is, because these are the type of things that build character.
Mhm. To me, it's also say that it's who you know, and taking that opportunity to network, right? Like I feel like I've met so many great people in the past year and a half that I probably wouldn't have met if I was heads down working on a project.
Yeah. And that's the benefit of LinkedIn. I think that's where that site thrives. I think that's where it's really doing well, is people connecting that are like-minded, that are doing the same things, or maybe in the same boat, maybe they're
Right.
not in the same boat. Um, I think that that's great and helpful, but the rest of it needs work.
Yeah. I think we're also starting to see some like niche communities pop up as well on LinkedIn, where LinkedIn has groups, but nobody uses those groups. Like you could join a group, but they don't necessarily work. So I've been seeing like smaller communities pop up, and I've joined a couple, and it's great. It's a great way to network outside of LinkedIn.
Absolutely. I think that it gives you the opportunity to speak to people that you would never run into in your day to day. So in that way, it's very helpful.
So as you're thinking about what's next and where it is that you want to go, what kind of work environment do you hope to find yourself in when this kind of all works itself out? And have you thought about that?
Yeah, I think that at the end of the day, for me, what I thrive on is working with the team, being collaborative, not just within my own team, but like working with the account teams and the medical writers and ultimately client. But I think that's the type of stuff that
Mhm.
um, I love to do. It's the collaborative work. I don't think anybody's ever succeeded at anything, especially in this business, by just trying to go it alone and work in a
Mhm.
in a silo. So that's a huge thing for me. And it took me a while working remotely to get like when I was in office, I was never like a person that sat down. Somebody's 3 offices over, shooting them an email, like get up, go over and talk to them, just knock on somebody's door and say, "Really, you got 5 minutes? I just got something in my head I just want to talk to you about. And,
Right. Get up,
let's
take a walk.
hash this out right now." Or like I was saying earlier, get a group of people together, whiteboard stuff. Like I think that for me, going remote and meeting was difficult to kind of replicate that over a Zoom call or something like that. But once you started getting used to it and getting people together, having everybody kind of have like that like-minded, everybody knowing that, okay, this is the world we're living in. Once got to that point, it was great. But yeah, I think biggest thing for me is team collaboration, working with
Right.
other people, working with people that are going to tell you no, people that are going to tell you, I don't think we could do that. I love working with people like that because then you get to prove them
Right.
wrong, and you say, no, 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 we could do it. I'm telling you, we could do it. Yeah,
No, those were the best parts of just sitting in a room and throwing ideas back and forth. And it's funny, you hear people say, and I
right.
want to work with a great group of people. It's not, well, Bob, I want to make 7 figures in my next job. It's like, not that we all wouldn't, but it's like, it really comes down to the people that you work with.
Absolutely. It really does, because it is a team sport, and it's not just, you know, um, it's not just your own team. It's you gotta work with an agency as a whole, everybody. That's the way you're successful.
That's awesome. So where can people find you if they want to work with you?
I am always on LinkedIn, and I've got my own website people can connect with me through, or
Mhm.
directly through LinkedIn. All my contact information's on there. So yeah,
All right. Well, Carl, I appreciate you joining me. Like I said, it's great to have you as a new connection, and maybe someday we'll get to collaborate on a project down the road. But Appreciate taking your time to chat shop and share your experiences. And so I wish you the best of luck, and I'll see you on LinkedIn.
Yeah. And Bob, thanks. I really appreciate this. This was fun.
Thank you so much to Carl Napolitano for being a guest on today's show. And thank you for joining me on the Flame Podcast. There's definitely more to come. Please take a moment to follow, subscribe, or hit that like button if you haven't done so already. And if you have any feedback or would like to be a guest on the show, send me a message at talk@theflamepod.com. I would love to hear from you.